Happy early Turkey Day, Bengals fans. You got your boys, John and Anthony here, burning the pre-Thanksgiving midnight oil and getting you some Bengals Steelers content. We thought with the big weekend ahead, some of you may be already on the road, some of you may be in the air. I don't know. But with the big weekend ahead and a lot of different things going on, we wanted to get a pre-Thanksgiving show to you about the big game, and we'll talk about just how big this one may or may not be in the grand scheme of things. But again, I'm Anthony. He is John. John, happy early Thanksgiving, my friend.
Hey, I mean, people call this Blackout Wednesday. I call it the Orange and Blackout Wednesday. So how about that?
There you go. Yeah, the orange element as it goes with at least the new orange pants. That has not been kind to the Bengals this year. So as cool as they look, they have just not been kind in the win column for the Bengals. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. And you got to subscribe. You got to resubscribe to that for us if you don't mind. And you can go to the Believe page or your favorite audio streamer to get that subscribed for you there, the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. This is where you can get our show. You can get Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. They just had the great Joe Walter on their program last night, I believe. And then, of course, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, and Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, bringing you all kinds of different stuff. We appreciate all of the support. Go resubscribe to that new feed, the Believe in Cincy podcast feed, if you like the audio side of things. And of course, for our show, and 3 and Out, we stream 3 and Out stuff on our YouTube channel as well. Underneath John on the bottom right hand side, you can subscribe to that YouTube channel, and hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, do all the things that we ask of you to do. So much stuff that we ask of you to do, but we appreciate the support that you've shown us, not only this season where it hasn't been the best for the Cincinnati Bengals, but throughout the years that we've done this program. Greatly appreciate it. And we're going to keep peppering you with content from our show and the other shows coming up here. So, John, let's talk a bit about, I guess we got to start with the injuries, right? I mean, it's a little bit, I don't want to say it's a slow news week, but there's a little less to talk about with that, with the Bengals coming off a bye, a much needed bye in a lot of different respects. And I think it's, obviously more of a mental bye than a physical one in a lot of respects. Granted, the Bengals have had some guys on IR and whatnot, but I think they needed this rest, this reset, although Joe Burrow himself was seen at the facility on days off and just really trying to make sure he gets things right. But speaking of Burrow, he kind of had some interesting comments, I don't know if alarming is the right word, but some interesting comments on the injury he sustained last year and possible effects in this game in particular.
Yeah, I think there's a slight feeling of uncertainty, I think, with some of these injuries, and Burrow being included. But for starters, Bengals only had 2 guys who didn't practice Wednesday, defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins and linebacker Logan Wilson. Wilson has been on the injury report recently with a quad injury, but this week is with the knee injury, and he didn't practice. Sheldon Rankins, though, appeared on the injury report right before the Chargers game, was it now a week and a half ago, with an illness. And he still is dealing, presumably, with that same illness now. Zach Taylor called it a viral illness, and he wasn't with the team on Monday when they had their first practice off the bye, and he wasn't with the team today. So God knows what he's going through right now. But if it's something that he just got out by you, Anthony, in LA, and he's still dealing with it, God help him, because that can't be fun. And obviously, him not playing would impact the rotation at defensive tackle for the Bengals. But again, the only two guys who didn't practice. So like you said, I think this bye week, while also mental, it did help guys like Orlando Brown Jr. kind of get back into the swing of things. He was limited and he's practicing again. No longer listed with that knee injury. Again, it was a fibula, but also a knee injury because it's the back of his knee. Whatever the case may be, it's possible that he does return for the first time in 3 weeks this week. Also, who was limited was T. Higgins, and this was interesting because the Bengals are trying something new with T, and it's the fact that both of his injuries this year have occurred in practice inexplicably, right? He's missed 5 games this year with a hamstring, with a quad, and Zach essentially told reporters today that, hey, like if T is limited some days, specifically on Wednesday, don't be alarmed. He's healthy. This is just a proactive measure to make sure that he's not being overworked in practice so that he's able to play on game days. And maybe this is a decision that they made 12 weeks too late, but better late than never, I guess, because obviously these injuries have followed T for the majority of his career. And so long as he's able to play on Sunday because his injuries haven't occurred in the games, that's all that matters. And also BJ Hill also kind of got that same type of treatment. He's been dealing obviously with injuries this year. So, and he's, pulled his weight along the defensive line, unlike some other guys in that group. So he kind of deserves some minor time off. And joining him, Charlie Jones was limited. I think this is the first time he's practiced in a while with a groin injury. He's been out for 3 games. Mario Mims also with injury. And then Joe Bocci, who did not play last week against the Chargers, he was limited as well.
Well, I mean, going back to Rankins, I believe his stat line right now is 18 tackles and a quarterback sack this year, and a handful of games missed. And man, that contract is crusher. I had a talk, and this will probably be posted a little bit later in the week. I had the usual kind of 5 questions with the other team on SB Nation, and it was Ryland over at behind the steel curtain, right? We did our 5 questions, and he kind of asked me basically, what's going on with the record, and what do you attribute certain things to? And man, it just feels like we talked about this last week too. It feels like every step of the way this offseason and or players that the Bengals have heavily paid and or relied upon, injuries have been in effect, and effectiveness has been a key. And these are also guys that they've drafted in high positions the last couple of classes as well. It's just like these guys that they have heavily relied upon. It's just been a domino effect. Rankins is one of them that just hasn't come together. Higgins, you give him the franchise tag number. God love him. I mean, he's great when he's out there. We know that, but the key phrase is when he's out there, right? I mean, it's Higgins, obviously the Zach Moss thing. The list goes on and on. They're outside free agents. We talked about this last week. That's been kind of a disaster. And I mean, you're naming off guy after guy there that's limited and sick, and you just go, man, these are guys that they heavily relied upon in various capacities and heavily paid in some respects, and it has crippled them.
Yeah, and it's not just the guys that were brought in this year. It's just I think they're realizing that exactly. A lot of the guys that they relied on in those playoff runs, they're just not the same athletes. They're not the same players anymore. And it's just all throughout the roster, it's just been breaking down. Obviously, all these guys matter and they're important. None matter more than Joe Burrow, who has been on the injury report all year with his right wrist. And, he's said in past weeks how it's still something that he works through, and it still limits him to some degree about, the spin rate and the velocity and everything. Obviously, you wouldn't be able to tell based off of the numbers, but it's something that he deals with. And he was asked this week because, in Cincinnati this weekend, it's going to be probably 32 degrees at kickoff. It's going to be in between the low 30s and the high 20s. It's December football, man. It's the air is getting cold, and that's just the reality of just playing at this time of year. But Joe Burrow has been throwing in the spring, the summer, the fall. He hasn't really thrown in the winter yet, and he hasn't really thrown when the temperature is freezing, and he doesn't know how that's going to impact him. He was asked about that, and he said, quote, "I don't know. That's a question that remains to be answered. I haven't experienced a cold weather game with that yet. In the past, when I've had injuries, cold weather does affect it." He's talking about, obviously, his knee and whatnot. So we'll find out if maybe I have a heater on the sideline or something. I haven't really thought about that yet, but, we'll see. And that's, it's typical honest Burrow and, being vulnerable in that situation. And again, like, if you wouldn't have known that Burrow didn't suffer a season-ending wrist injury last year, you wouldn't be able to tell based off of how he's playing. Yes, he's had a couple of wobblers here and there, but yeah, this is just the last real hurdle, I think, for this recovery.
Yeah.
It's been over a year since he suffered it. It's been about a year since his surgery, and this is around the time where you expect things to be clicking on all cylinders. And if he can just be able to overcome this, whether or not it is something that he needs to overcome, that remains to be seen, like you said. But I just thought that was interesting, as like this is really the final hurdle of if he gets past this, then everything is fine, and then they'll have him fully ready to make this playoff push if everything else goes according to plan.
I admire his. I mean, most players when they talk about injuries, or quite candidly, to give you a little peek behind the curtain, when we have some players on, this hasn't happened with this hasn't happened for a while, but it has happened before where guys have been on injury reports and they're coming on our show or whatnot, and it's, hey, don't ask them about the status this week or that sort of thing. I mean, the coaches try and play that a little closer to the vest, and Burrow, to his credit, has always been pretty candid about, hey, I'm having an issue here, this is an issue, or this is something I'm just kind of working on, concern here. I mean, we've seen him this year, stretching the wrist, and I mean, he's experienced some tightness. I've explained before, and again, I'm nowhere near the level of athletes as some of these guys that have torn a tricep tendon, and it gets tight. And I live in an area that doesn't get cold, so I mean, it tightness occurs, and it definitely occurs in the cold. You just got to make sure you stretch it out really well. You got to make sure you have the proper, I don't know if it's PT stuff or what have you that they would have on the sidelines, but just the proper things to help that along. And hopefully it's not that big of an issue, because, John, to segue into something else, this is a big game. This is a big game, and it's a big game for more than one reason. It's not just a big game for keeping the playoff hopes alive. It's not just a big game for that mantra that was expressed all offseason about get your wins in the AFC North, which has not occurred. 1-2 at this point, right? This is a big game for confidence. This is a big game for the futures of a lot of different people on this team and the outlook of this season. And I always, it feels like I always have been saying this for the last 2 months. I'm not a hot take guy, but I've given a couple hot takes the last few weeks. I think this is the most important regular season game in Zach Taylor's coaching career this week. And I say that not thinking about it lightly. I just think it's the Steelers. This team has traditionally struggled against the Steelers. There have been a lot of different dominating performances at the hands of the Steelers. Your season is basically hanging in the balance. Some people are saying, oh, you can have 8 losses and maybe make it work. You got to win games. You got to win games. You got to win AFC games. You got to win division games, and you got to beat teams like the Steelers, who are in some ways overachieving, but in a lot of other ways, they're being the Steelers again this year, right? I mean, that's what they do. When you think they stink, they're right in the thick of it. So I just, especially last year when the Bengals were keeping their playoff hopes alive with Jake Browning, and it was around this time of year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a little later, but they just got trampled in Pittsburgh. And this is the kind of game where you say that this has to be the season trajectory changer. This has to be a barometer game for how we look at the offseason, whenever that occurs, whether that's after, the last regular season game or maybe after a playoff game. But this is, I think this is a benchmark game for this coaching tenure and for this roster. I really do. I really do.
Yeah, I think the fact that it's the first game off the bye, knowing that there's 6 games ahead of you, you probably need to win at the bare minimum 5. Winning 6 gets you in the conversation for sure. To come out flat and to have the same problems exist after having that week off of resetting and just extra planning, it would definitely look bad for that. But like you said, man, the resume is terrible, to be honest with you. Even if they were more in the playoff picture, they have the worst strength of victory in the entire NFL. They haven't beaten a single good team this year. Like, I guess the best team would be, I don't know, like the Browns with Jameis Winston, and they're probably not going to be in the playoffs either. So, like, they have yet to proven themselves against any team that they could reasonably face in the postseason, anyways. So it's like we're still talking about the playoffs as a possibility, but if they even get there, where's the proof of concept that this version of the team could actually do any damage there? And obviously, part of that is with the defense and everything, but that's a new dynamic with this matchup because when Joe Burrow had his first healthy season, the Bengals swept the Steelers. It was Ben Roethlisberger's last year. He was on the decline. Then they replaced him with Kenny Pickett, and they had just a wild card crapshoot at quarterback. The Steelers' defense has always been, for my entire life, good and always reliable and always, a pesky side in the Bengals' thorn. But once that dynamic at quarterback shifted, it felt like the rivalry between the Bengals and Steelers shifted, where more of the focus was on the Browns and the Ravens because you just didn't take the Steelers that seriously because they didn't have a quality quarterback. Now that not only do they have one, they probably have two quality quarterbacks in the system. And obviously the better one is playing right now, and Russell Wilson. So you have a Bengals defense that has not proven themselves at all reliable against competent offenses. And that's what you have to treat the Steelers now with the way that Russell Wilson is playing. So everything is kind of coming to a head here, not only winning in the AFC, like you said, winning in the AFC North, but proving yourself against an offense that is probably liable to put up points with you. And you have to respond with that, and you have to step up as a defense. And it's all coming to a head in, like what you said, such a monumental game. And I keep thinking back at the fact that this rivalry has kind of shifted where it's almost taking kind of a back seat to the Ravens and the Browns in importance, but that can't be how it looks like this week because the Steelers are currently leading the AFC North, and a win here could change a lot and spark something that a lot of people don't think is possible.
It's weird because the sweep that the Bengals had in 21 against the Steelers seems eons ago, and really by NFL standards, it really kind of is true. The sweep that the Steelers just had of the Bengals this last year obviously is kind of skews your line of thinking, saying the Steelers have dominated this rivalry of late. Bengals, by my count, Russell Wilson's 1-1 against the Cincinnati Bengals lifetime. Hasn't had a lot of experience against them, and the last time he faced them was a ridiculous game in formerly Paul Brown Stadium. That was a wild one. The Bengals are 4-4 against the Steelers in the Joe Burrow era. Burrow's only played in 5 of those games with, I believe, a 3-2 record. Mm-hmm. So there's some stuff where you go, hey, I mean, it makes you feel a little bit more confident than some of the Marvin Lewis stuff against the Steelers. But still, last year, they were both against Jake Browning. That last game, that second game in Pittsburgh was just totally deflating. And that you kind of knew at that point, like, man, if that occurred, no matter what kind of run the Bengals are on here, it really wasn't going to be a realistic, big run from them. Regardless, though, I look at this game. You're at home. What do they have? 1 win at home. You're at home. You just got to have it. You're off your bye. You got to have it. This is a team that has been, like you said, a thorn in their side for years, and that's putting it lightly. It's been more like the bully down the street that keeps taking your lunch money over and over and over and over again. And finally, you have a quarterback that feels like he's the guy that can kind of return a few punches and shoves here and there. And I'm stumbling over my words here. You just have to have this one. And I really, really feel for the trajectory of this season, for the trajectory of Zach Taylor's continued coaching career, potentially in Cincinnati, I think it means a lot. I think it means a lot. And this is not one of those games, number one, that you can lose, but number two, if this somehow, and I don't even want to put it in the universe really, but if this somehow becomes a blowout loss for the Bengals in this type of season, I don't know how you recover from that. I really don't. And I'm talking about not only recover playoff chances, but again, future outlook for coaches, etc.
Yeah, I mean, they're hanging on by a thread at this point. I still think at just these recent losses, the clear disconnect between what Burrow and Chase are saying and what Zach is saying, how the messaging just doesn't seem to be aligned. And you hope that, after a week off and resetting, things are kind of back on the same page. But you can only have so many crushing defeats before you just start to lose hope of the entire vision and everything. Like you said, Russ is 1-1 against the Bengals. He was actually the first quarterback to beat Zach Taylor. It was the first game of Zach Taylor's career. That was like 2019, right, in Seattle, and that was kind of a crazy game too. And that was obviously his first loss. But also, I'm thinking that there's some slight parallels here between this game and the Ryan Finley game. And the only thing that's like keeping me paused is because inexplicably, I don't know, maybe I'm alone in this. I don't really know why the Bengals are favored in this one. Like, I understand the home team, but 3-point favorites against an 8-3 team seems a bit ridiculous to me. Maybe it's giving the Bengals a little bit too much credit. Maybe that's the way Vegas sees, how Burrow is playing and everything. But I don't view this as the Bengals being the favorites. I view this as the Steelers, like in 2020, like they were the team to beat in the division that year. And obviously Burrow wasn't healthy. He suffered his knee injury. No one expected Ryan Finley to do what he did in that game and how crazy that game was. But that was a pivotal victory in Zach Taylor building what he's built to this day. And it catapulted, I think, towards that 2021 season. And it was such a statement win. It doesn't feel the same because, again, the Bengals are favored in this one, and they're obviously a lot more healthier than they were back then. But, I mean, their backs are completely up against the wall. And obviously that season was completely kaput by that. At that point, the Bengals were playing spoiler. But I don't view it as too dissimilar to the fact that the Steelers are right now the team to beat in the division, and everything is going wrong for the Bengals and they can't get out of their own way. It would feel, I think, very similar to that in terms of like just a much needed win to solidify, to reaffirm what they've been trying to do and just really validate everything that they've been trying to do this year. To get a win of this magnitude, I think would be huge for them. And like you said, it really just goes into just how important it could be to spur something towards these last 6 weeks.
It's not only just like we said, playoffs. I mean, it's not just that. It's confidence going forward. It's okay. We're getting things in the right direction. And then as you see the schedule play out, John, you have the Cowboys, and the Cowboys pulled off something surprising last week. But you have the Cowboys in Dallas, no Dak Prescott. You have the Titans. I mean, they pulled off something surprising last week too, right? Didn't they beat the Texans last week? So you have the Titans, you have the Browns, the Broncos is a toughie, and then you have the Steelers again. But you've got, if you are able to get this one at home against the Steelers, your next 3 games are very winnable. So it's the momentum thing that would carry over with a win like this against your rival, against a team you've struggled against, and against a team really that has pushed you around.
Yeah. There are definitely, like, at this point of the season, the Bengals have proven that they can beat the teams that they should beat, and they can prove that they can keep with the teams that maybe are above their pay grade. At some point, though, like you said, you just got to win the games that you need to win, and this definitely qualifies as that. So there's nothing. I mean, we can talk about this for hours, but there's nothing really more that needs to be said than that.
All right, well, we're going to get to some keys and stuff in just a second. Just want to remind folks once again to subscribe to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You got to resubscribe to that feed. That is where you can get our show. You can get 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. You can get Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, who for the last couple of weeks have had some big guests. Eric Thomas, former Super Bowl cornerback for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Joe Walter, former Super Bowl offensive lineman, part of that amazing mid and late 80s offensive line that the Bengals had for a nice run there with Munoz, Montoya, Walter, Kozierski, a lot of big names there. But anyway, they had both those guys on the last couple of weeks. And of course, Matt and Willie Noball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. You got to get all those on your favorite audio streamer, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify. Go resubscribe, leave us a review if you can. That helps us out. And then, of course, if you are able, please check out our YouTube channel. It's a lot of our stuff. It's also 3 and Out. And then we do some other non-live stuff, not as often, but most of our stuff is live, but a lot of different stuff on the YouTube channel that you can get. Subscribe, hit the bell, do all the things, leave us a thumbs up. We appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you who are joining us live the night before Thanksgiving. I know you got a lot of things going on. Maybe you're out with some friends. This is usually, what is it? You called it Blackout Wednesday, right? Is that because this always, now I'm older now, but this was always when your friends from college would come back in town, your friends from out of town would come back in town, and it was always big bar night, or I don't know. I guess I shouldn't promote bar nights and stuff. But anyway, it was always one of the funner nights of the year. I remember when I was a little younger, because you'd have a lot of people in town, friends, family, etc. And then you do your thing the next day and gorge out, watch some football, that sort of thing. And of course, 3 games on tomorrow, Thanksgiving. There's one on Black Friday, right? So there's some stuff there, and then of course, big weekend with Steelers week coming up for the Cincinnati Bengals. So as we continue on, John Sheeran, key players and elements to this win. I have a, and I don't know if folks follow this on Twitter. There's an account called ML Football, and ML Football does some good things and some things where you go, okay, this is just kind of clout chasing a little bit. But ML Football is, they've got a lot of followers, and they post a lot of stuff and what have you, but they posted some random things about George Pickens and him running routes at his practice. And oh man, his route running looks amazing. And this, that, and the other thing, he's getting the hype. For some reason, every week that George Pickens either seems to have, whether it's a attitude issue or that, there's some questions about some stuff. He seems to, do we have John back here? I don't know what's happening there, but he seems to be the guy that rebounds really, really well against the Cincinnati Bengals. And now the Bengals are really reeling at cornerback because of Cam Taylor-Britt's issues with coverage, etc., because of the injuries to DJ Turner, Dax Hill. You've got Josh Newton now in the lineup. So I'm just putting it on the secondary, really, the secondary players in this game, because George Pickens is he's always been good and talented and whatever, but it's been a lot more, the first couple of years has been very roller coastery. This one, there's still a little bit of that, but he's steadied out a little bit and is among the league leaders in major statistical categories. So for me, you can't let him have the big game against you. He's had a couple already, and you can't let it happen.
Yeah, it's really the worst nightmare, I think, for the Bengals in the AFC North is how Russell Wilson has unlocked George Pickens. Like, their connection, particularly on those deep passes, has been almost second to none, really, in the league. And obviously, Pickens is still borderline insane with the way that he conducts himself, but like, he's got the production that backs it up. And the Bengals really don't have anyone who can cover him outside of Cam Taylor-Britt. And God knows what version of Cam Taylor-Britt the Bengals are going to get this week, but they don't really have a choice because of the injuries to both Dax Hill and DJ Turner. Like, at this point, they just have to ride with him, and they don't really have a choice. Like, if they bench him again, it's going to be like, I guess, DJ Ivy, who steps up in his place. Maybe Marco Wilson, who they claimed last week. They're just so down bad at the position, and they don't really have anywhere else to turn. So a lot of the spotlight's going to be on Cam Taylor-Britt, but it's not just George Pickens. Like, Calvin Austin is a great deep threat on his own, and I think he's going to be fast enough where Mike Hilton might be put into some precarious situations. And I think Josh Newton, there's promise with him, but the reason why he lasted to the 5th round is because he's a 4 or 5 guy with not a lot of length. So there are some, I think, athletic mismatches with the Steelers receiving group compared to this Bengals secondary, which is why a lot of the pressure is going to be on Cam Taylor-Britt to not be exposed in those one-on-one situations. And obviously having Geno Stone and Von Bell and Jordan Battle play well matters as well. But yeah, like, Pickens is definitely Wilson's top target, and there's just nowhere for Taylor-Britt to hide in this game.
Pickens in his rookie debut, 1 catch, 3 yards against the Bengals. Then he had 80 plus with a touchdown. And then in 2023, he had 3 for 58 in the first go around, but then just absolutely exploded for, I think, what is the best game in his career to date, 4 catches for 195 yards. John, if you do the math there, that's almost 50 yards a catch in that game that George Pickens had. It's like unbelievable. So the Bengals need to clamp down on him for sure. And as it always, I feel like I say this, I've said this, I can't even remember how many years I've said it in a row now, but every week this week, I'm going to actually ask you, do you think it is in the Bengals' best interest to try and match the physicality of the Pittsburgh Steelers, stand up to the bully, try and beat them at their own game as they've tried to do in the past, sometimes have been successful, oftentimes not? Or do you think we're going to play a different version, that the Burrows spread out and not so much hit you in the mouth, that sort of thing? We're gonna do some things on offense and maybe just try and scrape away with a turnover or two on defense, and that's how we win.
Yeah, there's a balance to it. I think you could never be comfortable dropping back 45, 50 times against TJ Watt and his gang of pass rushers. Like, this is a week where Alex Highsmith could be coming back from an ankle injury, and even if he doesn't, Nick Herbig, who's a second-year guy to Wisconsin, he's doing really well as that ancillary pass rusher on the opposite edge from TJ Watt. No one needs any introduction to Cameron Hayward. This is just a pass rushing group that is going to get the best of the Bengals offensive line at times. And there are very few defenses that like to stunt at the frequency that Pittsburgh does. So it's not just Orlando Brown Jr. coming back and solidifying the left edge and Amarius Mims, seeing what he can do on the right edge. It's going to be guys looping around to the inside and taking advantage of the struggles of both Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa. And Volson has struggled mightily against the Steelers in his career, and that's just a weakness that the Bengals just have to eat and try to make up for. So you need to be able to run the ball to some degree with Chase Brown, and maybe this is the week that Khalil Herbert actually gets involved. It's been 2 weeks of him on the team, and he's had like 1 carry, 1 fumble. So maybe the bye week gave him enough time to really dive into the playbook more and earn some more trust there, because it's really hard for Chase Brown, I think, to get 25, 30 carries a week and maintain that durability as the season goes on. So the Bengals offense at its best is still when Burrow's in the shotgun and having both Higgins and Chase out there against this group of Pittsburgh cornerbacks. So that I think the Bengals will have advantages there, but you can't get too committed to it and allow so many easy pass rushing opportunities for the Steelers defense, because that's where they thrive.
In my chat with Behind the Steel Curtain, I mentioned Khalil Herbert as someone maybe to watch this week. So you and I, for the lack of preparation you and I have on this show, my friend, we're on the same wavelength. I love it. I know, who needs it? Exactly. I'm in agreement with you. Obviously, the offensive line, key. But with something that he tweeted out about a week ago, and with a viral clip that has gone viral again this week in the game last year, this is a big game for Jermaine Pratt. Big game for Jermaine Pratt. And he's got to come up with one of those, fumbles against the Ravens in overtime type of play, the Travis Kelce strip, late in 22 type of thing. There's got to be a play there, and he cannot be on the highlight reel for getting trucked by a guy that's way smaller than him. If you're going to talk that talk, you're going to go up against this team. And Jermaine Pratt, Jermaine Pratt has one of the best plays in Bengals franchise history. I mean, he's been a good player for him. I'm not talking noise. I'm just saying, you put that out there. What do you say? Guarantee win, or we're not losing this week, that sort of thing. Big week for him. Big week for him in this game. And with what the Steelers like to do, physical nature, etc., to me, he's a key piece.
Yeah. I mean, it's Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, you know what you're getting out of the Steelers run game, and that's going to be where he needs to thrive. And yeah, if you're going to do the Chad Johnson thing, you got to back it up. Very similar thing, I guess. I mean, the Steelers aren't undefeated like the Chiefs were that year back in 2003, but very similar ramifications with that. And going back to your point about matching physicality, I mean, the Bengals defense has no choice but to do that, right? Like, this is the Steelers offensive line, interestingly enough. 8 players have played at least 150 snaps for them. Rookie Troy Fautanu, who we talked about a lot, the pre-draft cycle, he was injured, I think, in week 1. So it's in Broderick Jones out at right tackle and Dan Moore Jr., who got eaten alive last week by Myles Garrett. That's what Myles Garrett usually does. But that's also what Trey Hendrickson does, right? And that's been the entirety of the Bengals pass rush this season. So that Hendrickson is going to have opportunities. He's going to have a mismatch. And I think if there's ever a week for the Bengals to actually turn those pressures into sacks, which has been non-existent this year, this is a week where that could potentially change. It obviously depends on Sam Hubbard and Miles Murphy and Joseph Ossai carrying their weight along with Hendrickson. But Russell Wilson over the past 4 weeks has been sacked 15 times. It's like 6th in the league. But 29, nearly 30% of his pressures have turned into sacks, which is the 4th worst among starting quarterbacks over the last month. So Wilson has been getting pressure at a decent rate, but he's taking a lot of those pressures and turning them into sacks. He's not been the same Russell Wilson in Seattle where he was creating out of structure. Like in terms of throwing the ball and accuracy, looks very similar to peak Russell Wilson, but he's holding on to the ball for a really long time. And there are a lot of drive killing plays that he's been causing by taking these sacks. So if there is a week for this Bengals pass rush, which has been dreadful this season by all accounts outside of Trey Hendrickson, this is the time to actually gain those extra possessions back to the offense by getting off the field for once this season. Like Russell Wilson is going to give them opportunities to do that very thing. And if they let him escape and they let him extend these plays by not finishing at the quarterback, it's going to kill
them. Well, let's talk a little bit more. I mean, what's the best strategy before we get to score predictions, etc.? What's the best strategy on offense that the Bengals should employ this week? Because you said, you can't drop back 45 times against TJ Watt. However, the passing game is so efficient in so many other ways, and Joe Burrow's playing at such a high level, it's hard to lean on much of anything else. What's your mindset? What's your approach this week before we get into predictions in terms of the Bengals' best chances of success?
Yeah, it's not only like just dropbacks in terms of, trying to protect him from pressure. Every time that they play the Steelers, like Watt gets his hand on at least like 3 or 4 of Burrow's passes on line of scrimmage. Like there's no one better who's doing that. So you can nullify the pass rush by getting the ball out quickly, but you also have to be aware of where he is, and his hands are always going to be up. And that's, that is a trait that is translated for the rest of the Steelers defensive line. These things don't change, man. Like the dynamics of this rivalry, have evolved, I think, in recent years since, Zach Taylor have taken over, but there are a lot of similarities here, and this defense remains the same, and they're so fundamentally sound. And yes, they're edgy and they get away with a lot of things that other defenses don't, but they back it up. So it's a weird balance between making sure that Burrow is not constantly under duress and utilizing the quick passing game, but you're trying to avoid those plays that really can nullify drives. And I think a lot of it's going to be about capitalizing on your third and manageables, because converting on 3rd and long is hard enough. So trying to get some stability with the ground game to make sure that Watt is not pinning his ears back more times than he needs to. I really do feel like that's the key here. So making sure that Chase Brown is involved and trying to see what Khalil Herbert can do, I really do feel like that's key here. And maybe that requires them to be a little less aggressive on obvious passing situations, but so be it, because Higgins and Chase are going to be ready. And again, I think there's going to be opportunities for them to get open against the Steelers secondary.
Yeah, really curious. I mean, I know there may be plans down the road for Mims to take over at left tackle, but at least for the immediate future, this is what he was drafted for, is going up against a guy like TJ Watt twice a year. And can you limit Watt not only gets his hands on passes from the Bengals and Burrow, but I mean, he's intercepted them. I mean, it's not just sacks. It's like disastrous plays. It's turnover. It's like disastrous plays. And so those have to just be completely limited. And we'll see if Mims is up to the task there. But what do you see playing out here? You mentioned that you thought the line was really weird in this one. Essentially, it's a pick 'em, right? I mean, if the home team is getting 2.5, 3 points, it's basically, that's kind of the zero line, if you will. So, I mean, what do you think it's that far off? And this is Steelers going to blow the Bengals doors open, or do you think the Bengals coming off the bye, Burrow willing this team to a win, gets it done?
I think if they do win, it's going to be their first close win in quite some time, and that's going to be how it has to happen. I just look at it though, like Pittsburgh, far and away, is just the better team in the trenches. They're better at rushing the passer. Their offensive line has been through hell this year, but they've been better at protecting Russ. And we don't know how well Orlando Brown's going to be, and if this is his first game back. There's just a lot that I think Cincinnati has to overcome in the trenches, which has been a common theme for going on years now. And the fact that this Steelers offense is now dangerous throwing the ball, like that was a variable that we didn't know what to expect with Arthur Smith and Russ and Justin Fields, whoever is going to be at quarterback. Clearly, it's an investment that paid off for them. George Pickens is a mismatch against the secondary. Calvin Austin is going to have chances to break the game open a little bit. Pat Freiermuth, I'm going to be very annoyed when I hear Muth, scream through the speakers. It's always that one. Steelers will always have that tight end, though. They will always do something with his name. But I think the Steelers are the better team. I think they should be favored. Obviously every year Mike Tomlin will fumble against a 2-win team, and that's what happened last week against the Cleveland Browns. That's what happened against Ryan Finley all those years ago, right? It's a yearly tradition. Rarely does it happen twice. Rarely do the Bengals become, do they, get on the opposite side of that whenever they're the bad team in this situation. But I think the Steelers will win this because I see better than I hear, and I want to see the Bengals actually prove themselves against a quality team. And until I see it, I just have a hard time believing it's going to happen.
It's not a hard mindset to have here. I'm gonna point just something out to you. Just take this for what you will. Okay, this is the Steelers. We know the record at this point. Their points scored, points allowed, all of that. Week 1 Falcons. Let's see here. Yeah, Week 1 Falcons 18-10. Week 2 Broncos 13-6. Week 3 20-10 Chargers. Lost to the Colts 27-24. Lost to the Cowboys 20-17. Beat the Raiders 32-13. Beat the Jets 37-15. So blew the doors off of 2 teams that are completely underachieving. Then 26-18 to the Giants. 28-27 to the Commanders. That was a win, by the way. 18-16 against the Ravens, and 24-19 a loss against the Browns. So if you notice, John, there are a lot of close games in there, and some close games against teams that are good and teams that aren't good, and close games that largely went their way, but some others that did not. So, if the Bengals are not good at closing or losing these 1-score games, the Steelers have kind of had a little bit of a wacky season in that regard too. So I say that I think this is going to be close. And I actually say, I don't think this is going to be the 18-16 Ravens score that you saw there. I think this is going to be well into the 20s, if not the 30s. I expect a lot of big plays. I expect a lot of offense, which I know the Steelers defense is pretty good, but the Bengals essentially, I don't want to say if they have to play the perfect game. I don't want to say that, but they cannot turn the ball over. They just kind of have to weather the storm, take the punches, whatever metaphor you want to use there. They have to do that against this team, and they just have to kind of hang on and continue to make plays, respond, etc. I will say this: the one thing that I do not like about this is anytime the Bengals face the Steelers in a week of, controversy, coming off a loss, George Pickens being emotional, and it spells disaster for him. So that's what I don't like. I think the Steelers, my mind tells me the Steelers win. Part of me says that the Bengals will get it right after the bye. Joe Burrow's going to take everything by the haunches here, but I think they're a bit overmatched. I'm going to go 30-24 Steelers.
30-24. And what's sad is that this is December, man, and Joe Burrow's healthy. And in the months of December where Joe Burrow is healthy, the Bengals are 0-2. They're 8-2, right? Like, this is when he plays his best ball. This is when the Bengals are firing on all cylinders and making the playoff run. and it just feels completely different now. But this is the week, like we said, that everything can change, that the entire mindset can flip like that. And 5-7 doesn't look too great on paper, but everyone knows what type of 5-7 that is if they actually end up winning this game.
Yeah. Well, let's drop the mic and get on out of here. It is the night before Thanksgiving. I appreciate you hanging out a little later on your end, John, as well as all the live viewers that are tuning in across a number of different platforms. Appreciate all of you. You got a favorite Thanksgiving dish, John? I think I've maybe asked you this before, but what's kind of your either one dish where you're like, dude, I gotta have that, or like, hey, this is my go-to plate. Like, what do you got?
I feel like stuffing is typically like the safest, best side. We don't normally have mac and cheese as a side, and I just realized this recently. And honestly, I find it ridiculous that we don't. So I'm taking it upon myself to make it this year. I'm going to make it tomorrow. Gonna be 2-layer baked. Gonna have some bacon bits in there. It's going to be great. I already know it. My dad's not allowed any because he doesn't believe in mac and cheese at Thanksgiving. So no mac and cheese for my dad. But I actually do. I got a little story after you tell me your favorite side.
You know, it's funny. I told someone recently that stuffing, I used to hate it as a kid, like hate it, and now as an adult, I'm like, dude, I love it. Staple mashed potatoes are really good, and there's again another one of those dishes I hated as a kid were sweet potatoes, but if they're done right, I'm like, dude, there's my sister-in-law makes this one where it's almost like it's almost sweet potatoes that almost has like a pecan pie topping to it type of thing. It's so good. And what's kind of cool, it's kind of a bummer that we're doing kind of two different things on Thanksgiving. We go to two different places, but we're actually spending part of the time with my side of the family, and we do like a brunch. So we're going to do something different, like a little bit more breakfasty stuff. And then later go to the other side of the family there. And it's going to be more dinner, and there's going to be turkey, traditional turkey and stuff. But my brother-in-law also cooks some awesome red meat. So there's going to be a little bit of everything there. So it's a day full of food where I can gorge. And we used to do 2 dinners, and it was like, you have the same dinner twice. And it's like, can we do something different?
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. What's your story?
So I love the idea of like athletes having the perfect level of fame, because obviously Joe Burrow can't go around anywhere without being recognized. Cal Adamitis is a different story. The Bengals long snapper. I was in my local Kroger food store on Saturday night, and I see this guy with long hair and a Pitt sweatshirt, and I'm like, that's 100% Cal Adamitis. But I'm wondering, how many times has Cal Adamitis, again, the Bengals long snapper, no one knows who long snappers look like. No, like they're not popular. They're not on fantasy teams. How many times has Cal Adamitis in his entire career been recognized out in the wild, especially in Cincinnati? Like maybe like he was born and raised in Pittsburgh. He was a Pittsburgh, great player for 4 years, one of the best long snappers coming out. How many times has this guy been recognized? And I took that chance, and I'm like, walk up to him and say, hey, Cal, enjoy the bye week, right? It was Saturday night. I say, oh, thanks, man. And I just walked away. I just wonder how many times that's ever happened to him in his life, where he can just walk around and just, shop for groceries just like any other person, not having to worry about, anyone walking up to him asking for an autograph. I hope that he felt, I guess, special that someone did recognize him, but also at the same time, if someone walks up to him and knows who he is, that means that person is a sicko like me who knows, the faces of these guys and also has been following what he's been doing. There's been some obviously issues with the Bengals kicking game. I hope he didn't think like, man, has this guy been like, how much does he know about me if he's actually recognizing me out in public and everything? But perfect level of fame. Cal Adamitis makes, hundreds of thousands of dollars every year and gets to operate like a normal human being. Shout out to Cal.
I'm surprised he didn't say you're John Sheeran from the world famous Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast.
You should have come on the podcast.
It's funny you bring that up, dude, because like there are some there are levels of fame where you go, man, that would provide a night. Like there's like kind of the character actors in movies or TV that can get continuous work, but you're like, I don't know that guy's name.
Right.
I don't know. You're like, who I know him. I know that face. He's in a lot of stuff, but and then of course, they get paid well, right? So, or like the voice actors on cartoons, they use a lot of the same voice actors. It's like, oh man, then you're not going out getting hounded every single time. And yeah, it's kind of the long snapper thing, like you said, but I'm surprised he didn't recognize you back, man. That's surprising.
I would be concerned for him if he knew who I was. He'd be listening to far too many things that he shouldn't be. So,
hey, that's one of the guys that's been immune to criticism on this show. I mean, good God. But that's a fun story. When was this?
This was this last Saturday night at my local Kroger. I think he was just getting some like snacks for the bye week, and I bothered him for 2 seconds. So,
and then you asked Kroger if they were going to sponsor the show too, right? I mean, they were. Yeah. It's okay. Got it. It's all about the show. In case you didn't gather that, but John, happy Thanksgiving, man. Have fun with family tomorrow, and be safe and have some fun this weekend. I know you and I got some work to do, but this was a fun show. It always is for Steelers week, and I appreciate you, man.
All the same to you.
All right. Thanks to all of you tuning in live. Thanks for listening after the fact. Again, subscribe to the Believe in Cincy podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer. Leave a review. Subscribe to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast YouTube channel. Do the subscribe, the bell, the thumbs up, all the stuff that we beg and plead for you to do. Tell a friend about the show if you like what we do. We appreciate it. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and we will be back, I don't know, sometime after Thanksgiving to talk about the show, probably over the weekend or something. We'll talk about it. Take care, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving. Be safe.